I'm going to read from our Gospel reading today from Luke 14, which is part of which has a wonderful story, which I find quite amusing. Whether other people do, I have no idea. But Luke 14, beginning at the first verse. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So, taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull him out?" And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how that the guest picked the place of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give this man your seat." Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all your fellow guests. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Then Jesus said to his host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." Well, here we are with this amazing reading, part of the reading anyway. Let's say this morning, let me assume that all of you here this morning, you all look very affluent, you all look very, you look all good. Let's say you have a job in the city of London. You commute, of course, from Penzance, maybe you catch the sleeper, but you commute to London. You are paid £20 million a year. £20 million a year. But someone else in the city, somebody you know, maybe somebody in your group, maybe Rob or somebody says, "Look, I'm worth more than that. I want to earn 22 million. And then somebody else you learn in another company is earning much more than you. And you say, "Well, I want more money too. I want to be paid 26 million. I don't know which of you said that, I have no idea, but there you go. That's what you want. I remember years back, I'm not being irreverent now, but I remember years back, a front page of Private Eye. It was a picture of Her Majesty the Queen. And the big headline on the page, on the front page of Private Eye, said, "Windsor woman wins 4 million. And the bubble from Her Majesty's mouth said, "It'll make no difference to my life at all." Let's imagine, I don't know, looking at you, all look pretty fit this morning in the band. Let's imagine, I don't know, perhaps you are a leading Premier League football player. And someone in the team, that's probably Manchester United, the team with all the money, you are being paid like Mr. Rooney, you are being paid several £100,000 a week. You think that's not right. You either pay me more, you say, to the new man at Manchester United, or I will seek a transfer, and then I'll pick up the money as I move to my next club. In all those instances, in all those illustrations, I think there is one word you would want to use, And the word is greed. But in terms of this gospel passage today, which is about power and prestige and who you are and what you are and where you will see yourself and where you stand, the big word in this gospel passage, in this story which Jesus tells, which we shall look at in a moment, the big word is not greed, the word is status. The word is status. You think of somebody in the city, sake of argument, is paid 22 million, wants another 4 million. What difference does that make to that person's life? But to that person, it isn't the money, it's status. It's earning more than other people. It's being seen to be better than other people because you are the one who's earning the most money. It's interesting that this is one of the passages, Luke 14, it's also in Luke 22, verses 14 to 38, where there's another table talk, and the followers are arguing amongst themselves. Even the followers of Jesus argue, who is the greatest? What's going to be the rewards for us? What prizes are you going to give to us when you leave us? They become status-seeking individuals. This is a great story, this gospel story. It's an invitation list, which is possibly one of the most uneasiest things people can do. I can think of, not exactly rows, but at Christmas time when my mother used to make out the invitation list of who shall get Christmas cards, and who might be now deceased and therefore doesn't want one, who did not send her one last year, so they're not getting one this year from her, or whatever the case may be. It's a terrible thing. And if you throw a party, making up an invitation list is not easy. You have only so many places. Who do you invite? Who do you leave out? Who is going to be most ostracized if they are left out? Who is going to be most hurt? Who is going to be annoyed? Well, I've never been married, so I've no idea what it must be like, but I've lived in a house where the daughter was getting married, and I know making out the invitation to the wedding list, and this is a wedding story before us, was full of peril. Who to invite, who not to invite. Arguing late into the night, into the early mornings. Shall we invite Jacqueline, or shall we invite Bill and Daisy, or shall we invite Sid? And here we are. This is a wedding feast. I don't know whether you've been to a large occasion. We had this wonderful, which Alistair did some time ago, if you remember, we had we had about 90 people sitting all the way down. Maybe you've been to a similar occasion where there's been that number of people. And you arrive, don't you? And you see all these tables, and you see little names along all the places where the chairs are. And you think, I wonder where I'm sitting. I wonder where I'm sitting. Maybe you go and start to look around to see if you can find your name. Or maybe at some places you have a list, don't you? A big sort of blackboard, and they have all the lists of all the people who's sitting in row A, sitting in row B, sitting in row C, sitting in row D. And to some people that's a very important thing, you see, where they're sitting. Very important. The nearer you are to the big table, the top table, you might think the more important I am. The more valuable I am to them, whereas if they sit you right at the back, you might think you've just slipped into this occasion. And we have this wonderful story, which I think is a very funny story. It has a serious intent, but I find it funny if you think that Jesus was a great storyteller. All the sort of stories he told were very similar, or people would recognize them in their own lives. And we have this story about the people arrive. And they think they will sit where they ought to be, where their importance tells them. And they all find their sort of place, they all go in and sit down. And then the host arrives. And then, of course, lovingly and beautifully, he decides, out you go. You're not sitting in the right places. William Booth, many years ago, when he preached, he had this wonderful Sunday where he told the poor of the congregation, the destitute, the vagrants, the untidy people, he told them to come early, and he sat them in the rich people's seats. And when the rich people arrived, all those pumped up with their self-importance, they were upstairs where the poor normally goes. And you can imagine, they were hardly appreciative of what he was doing. In another part of this Lucan Gospel, Jesus has another strategy for telling people where they are in life. He uses a child as an object lesson. And in the time of Jesus, children were given scant notice, unlike the 21st century, where children rule. Jesus says, "Whoever welcomes this child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me, for the least among you all is the greatest." And Luke, in his gospel, presents us in the teaching of Jesus as a turn-upside-down kingdom. All the motivations, all the things we think are right, are turned upside down, of this kind of hierarchical system we invent, where we place people according to where we think and their importance and where we think they would like to be. I remember when I was in Nairobi many years ago, there was a wonderful story I was told there of a very poor man, very, very poor man, who would save his pennies for one day of the year. And on that one day of the year, he would use his pennies to hire a limousine and a driver, and he would drive around Nairobi. Now, normally, when he walked, or at least he would stand in the door of one of the well-to-do areas of Nairobi, where the rich people go, he would be turned away because of his dress, because of how he looked. But wow, when he turned up in his big car with his chauffeur who opened the door for him, wow, his world changed. People came out to greet him. People escorted him. People closed the shop just for him because they thought he had money. An illustration of the way in which we conduct society, the way in which we form society. When I went to America, I had to get used to the way Americans, I hope there are no Americans here, but I had to get used to how Americans greet themselves. They would say, "Hi, Tony, hi. Hi, I'm Hiram Gabe Davis. My father owns 42 oil wells down in Texas. We are a very powerful family, Tony." And you know how in England you would say, "Hello, Roger," with a very slightly "hello, Roger." But you wouldn't say to anybody, we never say to anybody about your father, about your family. Status. Some people live their lives by how they want other people to see them, whether it be in the boats, the cars, the house, their name, address, where they are. They say that is what makes them. But in the kingdom of Jesus, all that is turned upside down. That is not the gospel. Jesus, in this story, envisages the new community, the people who are not concerned with status, but people who are concerned to love, concerned with people who are concerned to care, people who are for others, people who want to walk with others, people who want to be for others, and all this stuff people spend all their lives building around them. In the teaching of Jesus, they have no point. And he ends the story, of course, by saying that if you give a party, it's the poor, the outcasts, the marginalized, the lost who are brought to the fore. For continually the gospel says the people who think about themselves continually, about who they are, what they are, obsessed with it. And in our modern society, that may be in fashion, it may be in dress, not only in physical and material things, are the people who never discover the true life, the life which is given to us in Jesus. Throughout the Luke's gospel in particular, it is the gospel of the poor, it is the gospel of the forgotten, it is the good news for those who are pushed aside in society because, oh, you don't have a degree, but actually I have a doctorate, so nice to meet you. Do you know, I happen to have 3 cars in my driveway. My next door neighbours only have 2. And our friends from London will know this illustration. I live in Bishop's Avenue. Bishop's Avenue is in Hampstead. It is said to be the richest road in the country. It is full of buildings, not so big as this, but it almost goes that way, doesn't it? With 42 rooms, probably 3 bathing pools, room for 9 cars, 22... It's an amazing road if you're ever in Hampstead. But maybe all the people who live there, for all I know, have lost their souls. Have lost who they are as human beings. This story, I suggest to you, is not so much about greed, it's about status. Greed can kill us. And status, and the chase for status, can kill us. It's a wonderful story of the people who come, who think, and find everything turned upside down. When I was in the music world, they used to have enormous parties, I must confess, mind-boggling parties. And I always remember that all the tables, it was either the Park Lane Hotel or one of the big hotels, a huge room, and the whole occasion was marked by status as to where you were positioned in that room, suggested how important you were in the music business. And I was very disappointed to find I was right at the very back. But at least I was there, I thought. But that's how it goes. But that's not the kingdom of Jesus. That's not the teaching of Jesus. He turns upside down all the things often our world takes as the way to be a person and to be a human being. A prayer. God our Father, we thank you that it doesn't matter who we are, where we come from, what our background is. It doesn't matter whether we've accumulated letters after our name. It doesn't matter where we are. In your love, you accept all. Your Son Jesus died for all of humankind, died for the man on the bottle, died for the prostitute, died for the people who find life so hard to meet, died for those who inject because they're trying to find something, trying to be high, trying to find a way out of their own abject misery, their own seeming failure. You are the God who so loved humankind that you call those who have to care for those who have not. You are the God who changes our worldly conceptions, turns them upside down, invites us into another realm of life and community, which is a community of love. The love that has been there, seen in your Son's dying for us. Take from us self-seeking, take from us an endless crusade to have more, take from us our endless desire for status at the expense of others. Teach us to be just to be, to dwell in your love. I pray in the name of Christ. Amen. And I was thinking as I was praying of a sermon I once heard. It was a very powerful, simple illustration about coming to the table of the Lord. Ministering in London. And he said he sometimes noticed the hands of those who came to receive. Noticing the different kinds of hands, the physician's hands, the doctor's hands, the manual worker's hands, the person working in Spitalfields, in the marketplaces, the person who was the painter, the decorator, the one he knew was an electrician. But all, whoever, whatever, seeking forgiveness. All, whoever, whatever, seeking to belong to the community of Jesus. All, who, whatever, knowing that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Our gospel, our community is for all, whoever. I remember when I was a kid, I had thought about choosing it for the 11 o'clock, and I thought it would probably produce a shudder through here if I picked "Whosoever heareth, shout, shout the sound." And I used to love that song. I used to wait when I was a small boy by what was then Timothy White's "For the Salvation Army Band" to march by. They had a good band, a large band in those days. This is going back before the First World War. And, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. Wonderful. That song, that hymn, talks about the gospel for all people, whoever you are. Wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, whatever situation, condition, the love of God is there and is offered for you. For me, for you. If only sometimes we could realize the power of God's love.